I will just present this first chapter, then you can read online of my work. It's a huge work, so I will just try to finish a chapter every year, and that's really a huge work. But it's amazing to be able to share it with you. So the first chapter is titled Balance and Contrast in the Succession of Orchestral Scenes. So, here, let's start with a quotation from Melville's Moby Dick, which is extraordinary because it tells us how important a contrast is in our interpretation of the reality. So, for there is no quality in this world that is not what it is merely by contrast. Nothing exists in itself. So here you have the first example from Beethoven's symphony. I would like to start with it. So let's hear. Okay, so you have a big effect caused by the contrast between two families. So here is the antiphony between woodwinds and strings, and it reaches a climax, a very huge climax in the middle. So it was very rare until the time of Beethoven. So it's amazing to begin with that. And the first thing I would like to talk about is the Traité de l'Orchestration from Charles Koechlin, who was a composer and a French theorist, who was the first one to tell us that this effect reached by Beethoven in his piece is not possible if we are not respecting some parameters. So the parameters he will talk about is the volume and intensité, which are two concepts which are very strange, and we don't really know what they mean. So here we have a quotation from this treatise, translated from French. Let's start by noting that two elements are involved here: volume of sound, volume, and intensité. I don't think it's necessary to define these two terms. In fact, I'd be embarrassed to do so. Every musician's ear knows what a big sound means and what an intense sound means. It's not that volume is always a direct or inverse function of intensity. It depends on the case. So I think that it's incredible that even Koechlin can be embarrassed to define those two terms. We know actors' members how difficult is verbalization in the domain of timbre. And I find that this quotation is really extraordinary because we really we felt this lots of times. One more quotation that can throw a little of light to these two parameters is this one. The flute, for example, for the flute, the volume at its low register is considerable and the intensity low. At high register, the intensity becomes bigger and the volume decreases. The lower notes of the instrument seem transparent. They let other denser sounds pass through and are easily covered because of their low intensity. So it seems that volume, it's mostly a qualitative parameter that deals with the quality of sound or the sound spectrum, and intensity seems to be more a quantitative parameter. But I ask myself, if are there only two parameters playing a role in contrast and balance? And I found that there were many of them that I will try to present to you. But I will start with one special concept that I use very often in my class. So the orchestral scene. What is the orchestral scene? So we can define orchestral scene or simply scene as a time frame in which the instrumental set or the way in which it is used remains stable. So a combination of instruments that won't change into a time frame, I call it orchestral scene. Successive contrast is created by the succession in time of two different orchestral scenes. And we can see where does it fit in the theory about the taxonomy of orchestral grouping effects, imagine created by Stephen McAdams and Tim. So you can see that it's in the segmental grouping part that that you can find this correspondence with this first chapter of my treatise. Dealing with successive contrast, what is important is to know when this contrast should be used. So, and at what frequency, how often, and with what degree of intensity. So when, how often, and how much. The successive contrast or the succession of different instrumental scenes can be used according to technical criteria. And this technical criteria should be all the mandatory changes that you should do to make things work. Let's say respond to a change of orchestral register, respond effectively to changes in dynamics, allow instrumentalists to rest or facilitate the execution of certain difficult passages, or respond to textural change with idiomatic use of instruments. But the contrast or the change of orchestral scene can be made according to taste or to subjective criteria. So they would be facultative, but they will help us to obtain variety in repetitions of the same fragments, literal or thematically transformed, variety in antiphonal, responsorial, and antecedent-consequent structures, or reinforce or blur formal articulations. So contrast plays a major role in the form-orchestration relationship, as changes in orchestration clarify or blur formal articulations. At what frequency? So the title of this presentation was A New Orchestration question mark, because I think that the more I read the treatises, Rimsky's or Adler's or Koechlin treatise, I realize that things are there between the lines. So the only thing that it must done is to just to take them and just to make it to put it in some specific order. So, for instance, in Rimsky-Korsakov's treatise, he says, we can listen to strings for an almost indefinite period of time without getting tired. So varied are the characteristics. The addition of a single group of strings will add luster to a passage for wind instruments. On the other hand, the quality of wind instruments soon becomes wearisome. The same may be said of plucked strings and also percussion of every kind, which should only be employed at reasonable intervals in orchestral composition. So I thought that it was an interesting quotation about frequency, at what frequency changes occur in orchestral music. One more quotation from Samuel Adler's treatise is this interesting one. Surprisingly, it was deleted in the third and fourth edition. So as string tone is rich in overtones, all manner of close and open spacing is practical. This property produces that particular warmth and vibrancy which lends itself so well to the performance of expressivo passages. Further, perhaps because of this quality, one does not seem to tire of hearing strings sound for extended periods of time. So at what frequency? So we can imagine that in an orchestral piece, we can hear passages with low contrast frequency, medium, or very high contrast frequency. And I would like just to present a very well-known example of extremely high contrast frequency. This one from Schoenberg's Farben piece from Pieces for Orchestra Opus 16. And in this piece, we can see the climax of the piece in which every 16 notes have a new instrumental combination, let's say an orchestral scene. The change is so fast that our perception doesn't have enough time just to listen it, and we hear mostly, let's say, a kind of gray sound instead of something that would be extraordinary, varied, and changing all the time. So the extremely fast contrast frequency can cause the contrary effect. But I think that Farben is so amazing because it's a kind of experiment, a kind of piece, amazing piece that is trying to do something completely new and completely different. And I'm not really sure that Schoenberg could imagine what he was going to create with Farben. So I'm still amazed with this piece. So the contrast frequency variation can vary within a given moment or passage depending on the desired effect. So the contrast can be at first slow and then fast. So we have the accelerating contrasts, but we can have the opposite process in which scenes alternate more and more slowly. This is rarer, but also possible. So in Beethoven's example, we had this accelerating contrasts, but in this Berlioz example from the Symphonie Fantastique, we have the same, but with other parameters which evolve very differently from Beethoven's piece. So let's listen to it. Okay, so you can see that there is a thematic condensation in the end, like in Beethoven's piece, but the difference is that here we go from a forte to a piano. So the frequency the frequency of contrast increases, but at the same time the dynamic level decreases. Contrast frequency and form. I would like just to present the symphonic scherzo, because within the symphonic scherzo, we have generally the movement in which the contrast frequency is at its highest level. And it's something that will underline formal articulations, but at the same time will reinforce the scherzando character of the piece. So here we have the second movement of Beethoven's Second Symphony, the third movement of Second Symphony. Okay, but we can also present a different parameter is the average contrast frequency. It would be how often contrast occurs in a composer's work. I think that for me, the average contrast frequency, I mean, if in a composer's piece, there is a lot of contrast and very often will be a stylistic criterion, and it would allow us to classify composers into schools. And I think that it's something that is very, very, very interesting to do, and that it can be done in the future because for me, this notion of contrast is something that will differentiate one composer from another, and even can be useful to create or to imagine different associations of composers in their schools. But it's not only the how often it happens, but at what degree. So not all instrumental scene changes have the same salience. The degree of contrast will be determined in principle by the number and type of instruments that change between two consecutive orchestral scenes. So the more different instruments are between two scenes, the greater the contrast will tend to be. So a succession of orchestral scenes featuring two completely different instrumental combinations tends to create a maximum degree of contrast. But it's an oversimplistic affirmation. So we should be careful about that, because the existence of very similar timbres between different instruments and across instrumental families will make it more complex. Because, for instance, we could have a pizzicato played by double basses and a timpani playing piano, and they come from different families, but in fact, it's more or less the same type of timbre and doing the same function. I think that this is really very interesting in Bartók's second piano concerto, because in the first movement he doesn't use strings at all, and strings are used in the second movement. So we can see that even between movements we have the biggest contrast. So here you have the score, the end of the first and the beginning of the second movement. So the degree of intensity is also a trademark of each composer, and some tend to favor strong contrasts in scene changes, while others prefer more discrete and nuanced evolutions. So again, the general degree of contrast is an important criterion that can be used to analyze the difference between composers and their classification into schools. One Rimsky's quotation, which seems just to give some information about his stylistic tastes, it cannot be denied that the constant use of compound timbres in pairs, in threes, etc., eliminates characteristics of tone and produces a dull, neutral texture, whereas the employment of simple elementary combinations gives infinitely greater scope for the variety in color. So, as you can see, in Rimsky-Korsakov's music, we should listen mostly pure timbres, and he avoids to double things all the time. And it is something that happens in lots of pieces from composed by French composers in the second half of the 19th century. So we have here a kind of French-Russian school, which is really very clearly expressed here in this Rimsky-Korsakov's quotation. So, time passes very quickly. So here I can present you the 9 parameters that will play a role in this change of orchestral scenes: color, tension, intensity, space, spectral richness, instrumental density, texture, polyphonic density, and orchestral register. So I don't really have the time to present every parameter. So they are presented one by one in the online article. So I would like just to end with some important things about that. So I will just analyze every change of orchestral scene by using what I call the balanced contrast configuration. So if we take every parameter, it can be in balance or in contrast or be neutral. The orchestrator will determine which parameters will be in balance and which will be in contrast depending on the desired effect. So contrast on all parameters is quite uncommon, as there is normally a counterbalance between contrasting parameters and those that remain in balance. Each passage, therefore, has its own particular balance contrast configurations. So I've prepared just some examples for you. So the first one is taken from this excerpt from Carmen Suite number 2. Okay, so here we can see the balance contrast configuration. So the parameters that are in balance is space. So let's say that flutes and the other woodwinds are mostly in the same position or very near of the orchestra. The polyphonic density, the number of parts is the same. So two voices in two scenes, and the color is in balance at the scale of the orchestra. We can accept that the going from 6 woodwinds to 2 woodwinds is mostly a small change of color, so we can call it microcolor. The parameters, conversely, that would be in contrast is intensity, instrumental density. So we pass from 6 instruments to 2, attention, and spectral richness, because spectral richness has to do with how many octaviations, how sound is expanded through instrumental additive, kind of additive synthesis. We have one example here from the same suite. Okay, what I want to say is that the change of orchestral scene is every modification in terms of which instruments are playing, but how they are used. So in terms of mode de jeu or even position in the space. So for me here, there is a change of orchestral scene. So it is both scenes are balanced in color, in spectral richness, in tension, instrumental density, and polyphonic density. But we have contrast in space and collaterally in intensity. But our perception tells us, I think, mostly that the two trumpets are the first trumpet is far away, and that's clear that it's not so strong in intensity as the first one, but mostly space and intensity are linked. And I will go on. Here we have just a very, very beautiful example from Romeo and Juliet from Tchaikovsky. So let me just play it. Okay, so here we have a balance in intensity, in tension, and in spectral richness. Spectral richness is the thing that it's very important here, because we can see that strings are playing a chord and a B minor chord with the third in the bass, but for woodwinds, we have to double notes, especially in the flute, to have the same richness, the same spectral richness. I don't really hear the octavation from the flute and the violin. So the flutes are creating a timbre, even if we are doubling one octave higher. So this example, I think that is the most beautiful example about spectral richness balance. So we can just listen to it again. That's because at the scale of the orchestra, the woodwinds are poorer in spectral richness. So if we want to balance the spectral richness with the strings, who has lots of partials and a richness which is not comparable to woodwinds, we have to double voices in order just to reach the same level as the strings. So I have, I guess,
could you start to wrap up?
Yes. Okay. So, so the last one. Okay. So unbalance in all parameters. We have a contrast in intensity, tension, instrumental density, color space, polyphonic density, and spectral richness, and orchestral richness. But I just got when we should listen to this contrast, because we had the strings coming just after the tutti. Okay, so I think I choose the version in which this rest is longer. So I just showed you some examples, but please, it would be really great if you just can go on the TOR website and just take a look to that. So it was quite fast, so I had to present it at speed of light. But thank you very much for that.
So this is a collection of teaching resources that is related to topics related to timbre. It started partially because we already had many people within the actor community who are teaching timbre related topics, and many of them generously contributed their syllabi with the intention of putting it up on the website so others can refer to them and possibly use them if they need to, if they want ideas on these courses. So the goal of this project is not just to gather this syllabi and put them together in one place, but to see how we could put this together and create a set of resources that could aid in course design. And one important consideration in designing this set of resources is the fact that there are some who teach entire courses related to timbre, but there are also others who teach a variety of courses that might not be focused primarily on timbre, but might need it to just perhaps for one or two lessons. There are also courses focused on perception and cognition, courses on music theory, on analysis, on composition, on orchestration, and many more. So with this wide variety, we quickly realized that it is impossible to create syllabi that cater to each individual course. And what is more useful would then to have standalones where lecturers can pick and choose the content that they need and that they want. So we ended up with 3 different modules, each containing several submodules and topics. We wanted to make it easy for anyone to find the contents that they need. And so we also tried our best to make sure that there are no overlaps. Depending on what a lecturer wants to teach. For instance, if someone wanted to create a lesson on oral analysis of pop music, then they might decide, I want a brief introduction on auditory perception principles. I want a little bit on how to describe timbre. And then perhaps I want to focus a lot on timbre, texture, and instrumentation in pop music. They could then easily look for the relevant sections and start to put the lesson plans together. So today, we'll briefly describe each module before diving into the main one that we are concerned about in this workshop, the one that is closely related to orchestration. So module 1 is named Defining Timbre, and its goals are to provide working definitions of timbre that are relevant to different perspectives on timbre research, and to demonstrate the interdisciplinary and multivalent nature of timbre by identifying and exploring these multiple perspectives that we can take in defining and studying timbre. You can see here a screenshot of our library of resources on Zotero, and if you are teaching a course and would like to be added, you can contact Andre. The resources, topics, objectives, and activities are divided into 3 broad topical approaches to defining timbre, including how we listen to timbre, how we produce timbres and tones, and how we describe timbres. Each broad approach comprises submodules that focus on specific topics relevant to these broader categories. For instance, in the How We Listen category, it includes submodules focused on foundational and historical approaches to timbre, timbre perception and cognition, cultural listening perspectives, and psychoacoustics. Module 2 pertains to the analysis of timbre. This module provides approaches to theorizing and analyzing timbre. There are resources for conducting timbral analysis on musics of various styles, genres, and cultures. There are also some resources for the various academic and practical approaches to analyzing timbre. The other goal for this module is to provide an overview of the historical, current, and developing tools for analyzing and representing timbre. You can see the division here into 4 large subsections. Context and framing includes preparatory and contextualizing materials that are necessary for understanding various approaches to analyzing timbre. Its topics are more abstract and consider theoretical approaches and methodological issues in timbre research. Concepts and analytical tools includes topics on tools that are used to analyze musical timbre and how they're conceptualized. This relates also somewhat to orchestration pedagogy from the analytical perspective. The third subsection focuses on methods and examples of sound-based analysis in both art and popular music from theoretical and perceptual cognition-based perspectives. It also explores different ways in which timbres can be represented using various technologies. And finally, timbre in context focuses on the differences in the ways that performers or practitioners and listeners conceive of and perceive these musical elements based on their knowledge and experience. This can offer insights into the various ways in which the musics of different traditions might be described, talked about, and or analyzed. Again, these submodules have implications to aspects of orchestration pedagogy that are concerned with analysis. Now, the third and final module, Applications of Timbre, is the one that most directly relates to the topic of our workshop today. Its general goals are to explore how timbre and its analysis can be applied in various musical contexts, such as composition, conducting, orchestration, and so on, to explore different means of representing timbre and their utility in composition, as well as in communicating analytical ideas, and to understand ways that timbre might function in composition and orchestration and its practical uses. This third module dives into the applications of timbre and timbral analysis. There are 3 submodules: transcription, representation, and synthesis of timbre, composing with timbre and orchestration. Each of these submodules deals with different aspects concerning applying timbre into composition and subsequent analytical output. So now you have a general idea of the structure and contents of this entire set of resources. We're going to do a deep dive into 2 of the most relevant submodules. This will be the third submodule on timbre and orchestration. And with that, I'll let Kelsey give more details about the first of these 2 submodules.
Great, thank you, Lena. So, yeah, I guess we're going to dive into the sub module called 3.3.1. We have a lot of structuring elements within our project here called Theory and Analysis of Timbre and Orchestration. Obviously a huge topic for which there are many, many resources. So first, let's kind of talk a little bit about what we mean by the term orchestration in this context. So for the entirety of the teaching timbre topics, we tend to follow the definition of orchestration put forth by McAdams, Goodchild, and Soden in their 2022 Music Theory Online article about the TOEJ, Taxonomy of Orchestral Grouping Effects. And the definition is as follows. So orchestration in their broad definition involves the skillful selection, combination, and juxtaposition of instruments at different pitches and dynamics to achieve a particular sonic goal. Now, one of the advantages of this really broad and general definition, or very abstract definition of orchestration, is that it can be very easily applied to a wide variety of contexts. And basically, it kind of answers the question of how notes and timbres are arranged in time and in relation to one another, invoking the parameters of rhythm, texture, pitch, register, and timbre, or mode of production, all at once. So let's, can we go to the next slide, please, Lena? Thank you. Let's talk about how module 3.3.1 is organized. So the goal of this module is to set up students to be able to successfully complete the following objectives. The first is to develop a comprehensive understanding of orchestration practices and their connection to perceptual principles. We also hope students will be able to explore orchestration in a wide range of musical works, genres, and style. We want to provide opportunities for students to connect their observations on orchestration treatises and establish theories that form the foundation of orchestration practices. So connecting what they see with kind of this big historical tradition of orchestration. And we want to connect timbre with orchestration because while they are related, they are clearly distinct concepts. Specifically, its role in creating compelling orchestrations. And next slide, please. Thank you. So to fulfill these specific learning objectives, which we kind of abstracted from the syllabi that were very generously donated to us, this module is broken down into the following topics, and each of which has its own kind of driving questions. So I'm going to go through each of the topics, their driving questions, and the resources, the key resources that we have kind of selected from the syllabi that we think most readily address these questions. So the first topic is perceptual processes in orchestration, which is organized around the question, what perceptual processes are involved in listening to orchestration? Basically, we take the topic and we make it into a question. Then we have the topic of timbre in orchestration, which asks how instrumental timbre plays a role in orchestration and how discussions of and methods of understanding timbre and orchestration can be intersected with one another. Our third topic here is the analysis of orchestration practices, which breaks down how historical and modern orchestration practices can be defined, identified, and analyzed, and how, importantly, how they interact with other musical parameters across a wide variety of genres and styles. And then lastly, we have included an orchestration treatises topic, which asks about the history of creating, understanding, and listening to orchestration, again, across styles, genres, eras, and cultures. So throughout the TTT project, each topic is supported by key resources and supplementary ones. Sorry, can we go back? Thank you. And so, the key resources that are listed there are those that our research team, which includes Lena, myself, and Stephen, and Bob, and Andres, and please forgive me if I've missed anyone, we believe that these resources most readily, again, address the core questions. And the supplementary resources are equally important and equally valuable to addressing the topic, but they might provide a more specific or narrow contribution to answering the question. And so they might be so large, like for example, Cooklands, orchestration treatise is so massive that it might require an instructor to go in and kind of do a little bit more legwork to kind of tailor that particular resource to what they need, kind of extract what they need out of it. The key resources in the first topic, which is perceptual processes and orchestration, point to the taxonomy of orchestral grouping effects and how different orchestral combinations may create different auditory scene analyses. And the works here aim to kind of explain how certain orchestrational techniques are perceived. And the key resources are effectively entirely works published by Stephen McAdams, Megan Goodchild, and Kit Soden. When we turn to the second topic here, which is timbre and orchestration, we take both a compositional and a compositional approach on the one hand and a historically and analytically rooted approach on the other, bringing in resources by Pierre Gluez and Emily Dolan. In the analysis of orchestration practices topic, the resources include published analyses of orchestration, so specifically Jennifer Beaver's analysis of orchestration as a form-bearing element in Ravel. And they also discuss how electronic mediation might affect orchestration in contemporary music. Specifically, I'm referring to the article called Making an Orchestra Speak by the authors Gilbert Nuno, Archia Comte, and Grégoire Carpentier, pardon my French. And while these two key resources speak mostly to music in the Western art music styles, our supplementary resources include analyses, references to, and theoretical frameworks for analyzing orchestration in popular music contexts, jazz repertoire, and music from a variety of cultures and styles, although this bibliography can always be expanded and we welcome contributions. Lastly, for this slide, the orchestration treatises topic is splits its primary resource focus between contemporary and historical sources. So we include Samuel Adler's well-known orchestration textbook, which is used very widely in university classrooms, as well as a historical source. So we selected Rimsky-Korsakov for this because, well, it's not super massive like Köchler, and it's a little bit easier to navigate and is also widely used in classrooms. Can I have the next slide, please, Lena? Thank you. So I want to talk a little bit about the kinds of activities that we extracted from syllabi and also came up with to go with this module 3.3.1. We have a few different types. I won't necessarily go into the specifics of the repertoire that's used because you can find that online. But we have suggestions for group discussion activities, reading responses, listening responses, and analytical exercises. So these kinds of activities might be relevant for a variety of different types of classrooms. And while it's not present in this specific module, in other areas of the TTT project, we include more compositionally oriented activities. So for example, we have prompts like create this hip hop beat using this synthesizer or drum machine, or orchestrate this piece for X ensemble. And we could imagine supplementing the activities in this module with like fieldwork focused activities, like encouraging students to go out into the community and ask professionals about their experiences, with an attitudes toward orchestration, trying to kind of like allow this to be sort of a meeting point for like kind of hallmark methods from multiple disciplines like ethnomusicology and perceptual realms as well. So thanks, I'll hand it back over to you, Lena.
Thank you, Kelsey. All right, so the next sub-module or sub-module that we are going to focus on today is concerned with interpreting orchestration. Musical tone and timbre in ensemble performance, a very long title. So this is looking at orchestration from a performance viewpoint. There are three sub-modules here, namely Touch, which we have already heard quite a lot about today, aesthetic and stylistic norms in conducting an ensemble balance and tone. Touch is all about orchestral grouping effects derived from principles of auditory perception, and this also ties in with the content of the first module, which includes elements of timbre perception and auditory processes, as well as the sub-module that Kelsey has just talked about. Orchestral effects include those envisioned in the minds of the composers, arrangers, and notated down in score, as well as what is being produced in performance. Touch describes grouping effects without specifically differentiating between the orchestrated effects and the performed effects. To be clear, although they originate from different starting points, they do hopefully converge in similar perceptual effects, whether it's imagined or realized. So this brings us to aesthetic and stylistic norms in conducting, which contains resources about performance practices and stylistic norms, specifically in conducting. In a traditional or conventional orchestra, conducting is part and parcel of bringing a performance to life, and therefore a crucial aspect with regards to orchestration as heard. Ensemble balance and tone offers resources on understanding instrumental timbre and practical functions in ensemble balance. This is approached both from the perspective of the orchestrator as well as the performer. And lastly is the collection of activities that could be useful in class. There are suggestions for class discussions, such as how might a conductor or members of an ensemble make use of principles of balance, dynamics, and articulation to encourage blends or to encourage segregation? Or what does it mean for an ensemble to play in tune and to use your knowledge of acoustics to support your response? As you can see, these are discussions of somewhat more abstract ideas, and they could be made more broad or specific depending on what the class is focusing on. Other activities include suggestions to incorporate technology, such as using a DAW to digitally alter the apparent digital space and then noting how different effects influence the result. The effects achieved can also be described with touch principles. Listening activities are essential in the discussion of orchestration, and there are also activities for students to listen to different recordings of a piece of music and to think about how certain orchestral effects could be very similar regardless of the performance, and other moments where there might be remarkable differences in effects. For those of us who are performers, we probably will also have experienced this on a day-to-day basis, where performance space effects, timbral effects, and balance decisions have to be made. Often these are unspoken. This submodule, you can scan this QR code. And now I'll pass it back to Kelsey for the group discussion.
Thanks. So one of the other things that we hope this resource will do is kind of help orchestration resources researchers, like yourselves, kind of identify gaps in the available literature and kind of encourage people to sort of fill them by creating, additional resources that we could add to this. I'm thinking especially of Victor's work that we just heard about. But to wrap up this presentation, we'd like to spend the rest of our time here today kind of in an open discussion. We have a few prompts on the screen here that we'd like to open the floor to anyone who would like to make a comment on any of these questions or to provide any feedback on the work that we've presented to you today. So here are some questions that we'd love for you to think about and that we'd love to discuss during this time. I'll just take a little bit of time to read them out to give you some time to think. So the first one is, do you have any suggestions for repertoire that you have found to be particularly effective for teaching orchestration or demonstrating specific perceived or orchestrational techniques, especially things that are maybe you've worked with the Toge or another large perceptually based orchestration resource, and you have thought of musical examples that aren't within that resource. That would be really interesting. We would note that down. How do you teach, or how would you teach orchestration in your own classrooms if you're not already doing that? What kind of technologies do you use to teach orchestration? Do you bring acoustic instruments? Do you use things like OrchPlay, OrchView to create like a simulated environment? How would you approach teaching orchestration in a pop music context? How would you approach teaching orchestration with respect to a variety of musical cultures, especially if you are not necessarily an expert in that culture? How do you manage a discussion in that respect? And what are some kind of creative classroom or assessment activities that could be used to teach orchestration? We'd love to hear from you. So if you have any ideas, I'm going to turn this into a grid view so that I can see you all. Please feel free to jump in.
There are some responses in the chat. Shall I read them out?
Yeah, that'd be wonderful.
Okay, so Hannah says that perhaps a bit tangentially related, but I had an orchestration class in composition undergrad that was all on extended or contemporary techniques. So it takes things in a different direction than just standard rep, and it was incredibly helpful. The final project was orchestrating a John Cage sonata for prepared piano for a small mixed quartet. So we would note all these ideas down. Yep.
Sorry, can I just respond to that for a moment?
Yes.
Thank you for that, Hannah. That's so interesting. When we were putting together the sub module that Lena spoke about, we were looking for resources on like orchestrating extended techniques, and it was really challenging to find them. I'm a flute player, so I know all the method books for practicing extended techniques for the flute, for example, but we couldn't find anything that talked about how you might specifically focus on extended techniques and put them together. Of course, you can extract those sorts of things from an original analysis, but the 70s, ooh, that would be great. Thank you, Hannah. If you wouldn't mind letting us know what that eBay book is, that would be wonderful.
All right. So the next comment is by Jose, who says that can't talk because they're in a noisy place. And one of the best score to study orchestration is Luslovsky's Paganini variation, comparing the two pianos version with the piano solo and orchestral version. So that is another resource that we could note down.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I like
Ash, I'll let you respond to each one. Sorry, I was too eager to carry on to the next comment.
No, I'm sorry. I keep interrupting you. I really like the idea of reorchestration as being sort of a creative activity to do with students, because especially if you put them in groups and then get them to reorchestrate the same passage or something, you would get wildly different. Well, actually, you might get similar things if they're all being taught the same techniques, but it would be interesting to see what the results of that would be. Sorry, now I'm just kind of talking.
Right. The next comment is by Ash, who says that I used this digital modular synthesizer in one of my classes this semester, and I think it'll be a great resource for teaching timbre in pop EDM music. And there's a link there, so we will definitely take a look at that. And also there is an online drum machine that they shared.
Awesome.
Victor shared some extended techniques in music of Helmut Lackermann.
Ooh,
and there is a CD-ROM. That's great.
Exciting.
Jane said, I had a prof who used Han Dun's work as an example of orchestration, combining amplified and acoustic instruments, tempered and non-tempered instruments, which blurs the line a bit between pop, classical, and film music. And Jimmy says, a very specific example. One thing we often do in orchestration classes is to orchestrate a piano piece for a string quartet. I found it interesting to use Beethoven's Opus 14 as a case study, since he adapted his own piano sonata to the string quartet. All right. And the final one by Pierre says that I had the opportunity to take a class on orchestral mockups, an approach that allows for the development of one's inner vision of timbres. That is amazing. Additionally, the use of the program StaffPad is highly beneficial as it combines handwriting input with advanced sound playback technology, offering a seamless integration of composition and realistic orchestral mockups. So we have quite a lot of suggested resources here that we could possibly add into the teaching timbre topics.
That's wonderful. Thank you. I'd also be interested to know about how, I feel like there's so much kind of colloquial discussion about timbre that happens in classrooms that maybe we don't think about as being codified, but I feel like there has to be a way to sort of pick up that kind of casual exchange as you go through. I'm thinking about in my conducting classes in my undergraduate degree, there was just so much discussion about balance and tone, and that in relation to the structure of the music. So if you have any ideas about how to sort of pick up that sort of informal speak and help us to be able to collect it in this format, that would be very much appreciated. Thank you so much to everyone who contributed their ideas here. This is absolute gold for us.
If you have any other ideas, feel free to email us.
Yeah.
So, as you said, so I am professor for composition and not for orchestration, but so I studied composition at a conservatory. In France, you do small conservatories, regional conservatories, national conservatories, and in this occasion, I studied orchestration with different people, Anna Gossin, Alain Louvier, a few others, and then Marc-André Dalbavie at the National Conservatory was the first one who started to verbalize concept, and this is from him that I started this sort of functional orchestration. I won't speak today about that. There is a talk that I gave a month ago, and there is a video, I think, available for the people from Actor who summarize that. And also I write, there will be an article, and I write a treatise, which is not finished, but I could put the link of this treatise online for the Actor members, if you want. So I started 21 years ago to teach orchestration. It started in Berlin as an adjunct. I was the first one teaching orchestration separately for composition. In Germany, there were no orchestration class. It's more a French and Russian tradition. And the composition professor, Kiburz, asked me to teach orchestration. And then I continued when I was assistant professor for composition at Columbia. I was teaching parallelly orchestration, or it was Tristan Muraille or me. We are doing that. And then when I became a senior professor, I continued to do that for my students separately from my composition class. I always, I prefer in Germany, people teach orchestration in their composition class. I prefer to separate both because I speak about functions. Also my audience is more bright. And I want to cover both the classical and the modern techniques. It's open to different profiles, composers, conductors, music theoreticians, instrumentalists. In that mode, it was even great because I had the sound designer coming, and it was really open, and we had a lot of very interesting discussion and research too. What is important for me is that we train in the passive knowledge of the orchestration techniques. We see some great scores of the repertoire. Particularly at the beginning, I will speak about that. I take scores which are very, very known. I hope that everybody knows. So the third of Beethoven, then finished by Schubert, so that people know and we can really go into the detail how it is orchestrated. And parallelly, there is a practice, a class where you realize you write a lot of scores, you orchestrate a lot of scores. Since my return to Europe, I teach at superior music conservatories, not at universities. So automatically, my students are professional musicians, majoring in bachelor, but mostly in master and postgraduate master class, we say, in music. They are composers, conductors, music theoreticians. So automatically, they have a good intuitive knowledge of music. They know most of the orchestral score of the repertoire that we study, and they can read music and complex orchestral score. What they miss is perhaps this sort of functions to read the function and the technique which are associated. So my class, it's important. I teach orchestration in the sense of what you mentioned from Macadam, Schofield, and Salomon. It means it's not a class where we study the instruments. This is another class, what we call in Germany Instrumentenkunde. And they have all the students have to follow this class first before entering to my class. And when they don't do that, they need to read the treatise and they have an entry test to be sure that they know very well their instruments. And we study orchestration. It means we look at the different techniques, even the functions, what I call functional orchestration, for arranging a timbra, what Victor mentioned, or all the problem of contrast, doubling, mixture, coupling, doubling balance, textures, voice leading, different layers, form, crescendi, and so on, and so on. So, as I said, there are two classes. There is a separation in Leipzig. It was not always the case, but I have the comfort to be able to teach a seminar where we analyze and we present the concept. It's 90 minutes a week. I have about 15 to 20, this year 25 students. And then we do a praxis course after that in small groups where they write scores at home. We do sometimes exercise inside the room, and this is small groups of 6 people. I have also an assistant, we alternate, and every week they have to write for that. So as important, I don't teach functional orchestration in my class because it will be too conceptual, it will be too abstract. The treatise that I'm writing or the research that I'm doing is more for the teachers of orchestration. But you will see sometimes I do a piece and I speak about different doublings or the 7 functions for doublings, or what is a coupling, the 4 different types of couplings, or different types of texture of what is a trilogic, rhizomatic. So I introduce slowly the concept I will show you. I do the seminar chronologically, not just like that. It's because the functions are much clearer when we speak about classical music, pedal, etc., because it's generally one instrument or one group of instruments doing things, and then we go to texture, and then we go to things which are more complex. It's why doing chronologically helps to do that. So generally in the first semester, I do the classical and romantic music. Then in the second semester, the late romantic music and the first half of the century. And the third semester, when I can, or during the second semester, we do a lot of new music, contemporary music. And starting in the second semester, the students begin to analyze the pieces, which is very difficult. Analysis in orchestration takes a lot of time. It's very difficult to not describe. Generally, they describe the instrument, and they do that under my supervision. We have meeting before, and then they present in front of the class that, and we start, you will see, with Brahms in the first semester. So in the first semester, here it's a typical, the first semester is always the same. It's a typical curriculum for my first semester. I have 2 first sessions where I present many principles, history of the orchestra, but history in the sense of the construction. What is an orchestra? I speak about ensembles. I speak about ensemble in other music. What are the different principles of combining instruments? I give some general concept of functional orchestration, the concept of directionality of the instruments, the trilogic, how we write a chord. You find that in many treatises. The notion of wet, dry, the 7 main functions for functional orchestration, how to apply those functions to apply on one instrument, perceived as one instrument, on successive or simultaneous layers. And I start to speak a little bit about sound mastering. And then we speak about natural brasses, because in the first semester, they continue chronologically to orchestrate with natural horns and natural trumpets so that they really understand the functions. And then I start, generally I start always with an introduction of a symphony of Haydn. It's only 20 bars, and I spend 90 minutes on that analysis where I analyze every note. When I say every note, it's always the idea that the composer had an empty page, and all the decisions of Haydn I try to justify, and speaking a little bit about the, only for the introduction, about the trilogic, the writing of the chords. Here in this introduction, it's interesting because there is a horn function, but it's not played by the horn, but by a bassoon, etc., etc. And then, generally, I jump to the Schubert's Unfinished Symphony. They know that very well, but I can speak about mixture, I can speak about trilogic, I can speak about the principle of crescendi with balanced layers, etc. And I can start with some effects of orchestration. Then I go to Beethoven, generally. I can speak about meta instruments, form and orchestration, and what I call rhizomatic orchestration. I have no time to speak about that today. And then we jump to the romantic orchestration, for them something very new, because so it's Berlioz, Symphony Fantastique. They know that, but we discover how far it is from Schubert and from Haydn, and they learn a lot about principles of romantic orchestration and a lot of couplings, techniques, and a lot of effects. Then sometimes I do Schumann, and I finish with Brahms, the 4th symphony that they know very well. I start with the last movement because it's a variation form, so we don't have the formal problem. Each one has to analyze one variation, and we have a lot of things to discuss about texture, about virtual instruments, etc. Then the semester after that, it's more free. I pick up, here I have a list of possible things. Sometimes I speak about the Tristan Prelude, where I speak about relays, rhythmatic orchestration, Klangfarben melody, in a way, before Schoenberg. I can speak about Schoenberg, Mahler, Rimsky, Schoenberg, Webern, with all the techniques of segregation of layers, high contrapoint, differentiation of timbre. I generally do always Bartók Blue Bard Castle. It's a symbolist orchestration. It's an early Bartók. And here there are a lot of things to analyze. Every door has a new technique, a new textural technique, and I can start to speak about sound mastering effect that you have a lot by Ravel, sometimes by Bartók, and sometimes I speak about Dukas, Respighi, De Falla, Stravinsky, Strauss, of course, a lot of Debussy, a lot of Ravel. And in the last semester, or if I can do, and they bring their own score, I speak about new music, so Ligeti, Dittier, Chelsea, Berriot, Griset, Lachman, Charino, Thomas Hades, Hans Abrahamsen, Dalbavi, Kaya Sariao, George Benjamin, Bert Führer, Ozung Chin, Gérard Pesson, Matthias Pinscher, Rebecca Sanders, Georg Friedrich Haas. There are just a few examples of what we could analyze. It changes every time. And even some young composers like Alec Milchek, Marc-André, Mauro Lanza, Eno Pope, Francesco Filidei, Francesca Veronelli, Yves Choris, Hier Klartag, Andrei Adamek, Clara Janota, and many others. So, and now I speak about the praxis orchestration, the small groups where we have to write. Also, I do that chronologically. So we start with the classics, small Schubert. I will give an example at the end if we have time. Haydn, Schubert, Beethoven, Mozart. Then we start to do romantic orchestration, Schumann. We do some exercises from Bizet, Mendelssohn, Lili Boulanger, Brahms, Chopin, Grieg, of course, a lot of Grieg to orchestrate. Then we go to modern orchestration if we have time. You will see why, because we are always late in praxis compared to the seminar. So we orchestrate some Bartók, some Crawford Seegers, Debussy. We reorchestrate Ravel and we compare with the original, or Scriabin, Turina, etc. And sometimes we do new music, Ozung Chin, Cowell, etc. And sometimes I have some very advanced students who take individual lessons with me. And then we have crazy projects. For example, we did the orchestration of Griset, a prologue for Sola Violo. It's a piece for viola solo, and we orchestrate for big orchestra. So it's very interesting to analyze the effect, or Tellure by Murray, or some crazy project like that. Here I have something that I give to my students in German, so I hope it's translated well. It's how to do analysis, and analysis when you orchestrate or when you do your analysis of a piece which is already orchestrated or written for ensemble. So first thing, never describe. Messiaen said the analysis starts when the description finishes, but I encourage them to understand the functions. Why? Because also they are composers or they are conductors, and they need to see how the composer thought when he or she had an empty page. They have to stay synthetic, of course. Table principles are when they analyze for the class. Very important in orchestration. It's not vertical only orchestration. Victor spoke about that, about the time, etc. Doing a form analysis, whether it is when you analyze a piece which is already orchestrated or when you want to orchestrate something. When I say form analysis, of course, it's the different sections, the different parts. It's a classical form analysis, but you have to go much further in orchestration, what I call the phraseological analysis, the notion of arthisthesis, the accent, the question answer, the statement control statement, and the respect of what I call the trilogic or sometimes not. And then you speak about the historical context, etc. And then you go to the detailed analysis with some examples. Not everything, of course. So sometimes there is something interesting to say about the hierarchy of different layers, main ground, background, fusions, and this relation to the form, verticality, horizontally, the scene also, of course, what Victor presented. So the doubling techniques, I have 7 doubling functions, and they have to understand these doubling techniques has a function, which is either spectral reinforcement or opening the space or amplitude reinforcement, etc., etc. How is it written in each group? Is it a group orchestration or is it more complex? Are there some couplings which are interesting? Texture, and they have to do some analysis about how the texture works, type of motion, type of etc. And then the strategy for the transitions, for the contrast, and which instruments we have. So this is what I call the trilogic. So we have the formal level and the phraseological level. And in conclusion, before I think I have a little bit time to show an example. So in some conclusions, first, so as I said, I don't teach the functional orchestration as it is implied, and from time to time, I explain some principle when I do something, I speak about what is the texture, etc. But it would be too abstract to do directly the functional orchestration. Second thing which is very interesting that we have the seminar, we have the practice, and students always believe that they have understood the techniques in the seminar. And you see that often when they start to write even very easy pieces, they are blocked. It's very difficult. So it's very difficult to digest intuitively the orchestration, to be good in orchestration. Sometimes you need many years of practice to understand. You think you know how works a virtual instrument, how works a small texture, how works that, but it's very difficult to reproduce. So that is important when you teach orchestration to respect. There are, of course, a lot of differences between students, not only in terms of niveau, but also in terms of level, but in terms of the composers generally are very creative, but they go in many directions. The conductors are more classical, and it's interesting to adapt. And here, that is very important. The whole difficulty of the practice of orchestration is, in fact, to understand, to feel. It's really intuitive to feel the musicality of the work, often intuitively and musicality. And orchestration, this is a way to feel something. I will speak that, and to put a note on that. So it's a sort of verbalization, or you write an instrument doing something which is just implied musically, and that is a difficulty. You have to be highly musical to feel, and then you have to write it to realize it. So, for example, so you need to put notes and instruments where it was something very small. In my class, I often ask the students, I am on the piano, but when they realize, but I ask them sometimes to play if they can, because I want to observe them, to observe what they do when they play. Here they do a little bit louder, here they put a little bit of pedal, even sometimes they have the shoulders which are a little bit higher, and we look at that and I say, look, you did something which are just the shoulders, so you need to put more energy, or you have an accent here, or you have a pedal, which means the sound has to be more weight. Or even sometimes I have them in front of the group to sing the piece, the motif, etc., with the hands. I mean, they sing and they move their hands, and we see very interesting thing. They open a little bit more the hands, so it means suddenly they need a small crescendo, or more mass, or more tension, or more light, or they alternate right hand and left hand in the same motif. So it means they will need a small contrast of one instrument starting and perhaps the answer on the other thing. So like that, they can see what they do, how they feel the music. They have at home to listen internally, or to play a lot the piece, to be elegant and not to only orchestrate the notes, like I would say. I give a small example. I hope it's okay for the time. Okay. So here it's one of the first example I give in the first semester. The second piece they have to orchestrate. This is very known. This is the Schubert Moment Musical in F minor. And so first thing, they have to choose instrumentation, which natural horns and natural trumpets. It's in minor, so they will have to, is it in F, in F flat, when it starts to be F flat here, etc. They have to be clever. Here I follow what I learned in Paris Conservatory. In Paris Conservatory, we have exams. In the small conservatories, there are only 12 hours. In the higher conservatories, the final exam is 17 hours a day. You start at 6:30 and you finish at 23:30. evening, so 11:30 p.m. So which means that what you learn, it's so intense, you are so tired that you spend 10 hours just working on the piano piece, and you take all the decisions on the piano piece. And then the 7 last hours, you write the orchestra. And it's a good method because you have to take all your decisions, because if you write your oboe here, perhaps you have a problem in the second part. It's like chess. You need really to decide things on the piano. So the form, and here we see that, here, so we have a first part with where is the melody, where is the accompaniment, how do I do, which character is it? Then I have a contrast, I have a second part with a melody accompaniment. I need a sort of contrast to respect the trilogy. Then I have a big forte. It will be a tutti. What type of tutti? How do I write my winds, etc. My brass. And then I start again. So this moment, and then I have a sort of conduct, which change, which is repeated 2 times, are repeated 2 times. So we need to repeat the orchestration, but perhaps in another way. The dynamic is a little different, it's pianissimo. And then we have a coda, which has a completely different character. And then we work further.
Sorry, Fabien.
Yeah.
You did not share the screen. I don't know if you were intending to for this example, or
it's not on the screen.
It's on the screen.
I can see it.
Oh, you can see it. Sorry.
Okay. Okay, no problem. So, and then you go further. So here, you see that you have a small accent here. So you will need to orchestrate, of course, those accents. You have also a sentence which has perhaps, which can be separated in 2 periods, a sort of question and answer. And generally also, when you have a repetition, you need a little bit of contrast because it will be too boring to repeat twice. And generally in the classics, they put the answer a little bit more weight. You have a pedal, or you have a line which is more legato, a pedal of horn or something like that. Same thing here. And then the tutti. And you go further. So here, okay, how can we do more weight? So they have choices. Each one does in a different way. And what is interesting, we can compare the different versions. So all the students orchestrate the same thing at the beginning, the first semester. And here, perhaps we could emphasize this line or both, or have a pedal here. So about the accents here, I repeat something, so it's an echo. How do I do an echo? So they play with their hands and they see generally they orchestrate first the same thing, but here and here. But we can go further. So we go to a very elegant orchestration, and at the end there are nice modulation and nice writing, and suddenly we observe that there is a pedal of F, so it's a bit more paysan, and we could even interpret the music in a very, very brutal way, having a sort of bourdon to imitate this paysan dance. And we obtain at the end something which is very orchestrated, very rich, for something which is easy. It's the first exercise that they have, or the second exercise this semester. And then we go further with texture. But it's about feeling this form. So that's all, and I thank you very much for your attention.
So I'm not gonna dig too much into the taxonomy, go too deep in the taxonomy today. I'm gonna keep it really about just the tools and the software. So I'm gonna talk about new platform for music pedagogy, and research, OrchSim, OrchPlay, and OrchView. I'm gonna start with OrchSim because this is really it's personal to me. It's really foundational to my relationship with McGill and the research lab of Stephen McAdams, and it's at the origin of everything we've done together. And I did a presentation in Germany on the OrchSim that was really extensive. I tried to compress it in less than 10 minutes. And then for the OrchPlay and the OrchView, the more practical softwares, I'm gonna I have a little PowerPoint and I'm gonna show you the softwares a little bit. So first of all, who am I? Well, I'm supposed to be a composer. I no longer have time to compose. Hopefully, maybe in 2 years I'll start composing again, maybe in a year. But for those interested, I did my master's on the concept of musical organism and the virus metaphor. So it was a study on organic development of musical material. And for my doctoral thesis, I wrote a piece more about the psychology of the human mind. So I took a novel by Guy de Maupassant and I tried to make a musical representation of that on the state of madness. So in 2009, after finishing a commission I had for the McGill MGSO, I began work actually on having a better simulation system. And then Denis thought it was interesting, and we started to work together on building what was called DOSIM back then, not OrcSim. That led to us in 2016, much later. We decided to actually get our simulation available to make our simulation available to people with an easier interface that didn't require so much computing power. That was easier to use. So we founded OrchPlay Music. We incorporated. And in 2020, I finished my PhD, the end of 2019, and I started a postdoc where I developed OrgView for Stephen McAdams, especially because of my experience with OrchPlay, of course. So, so what is OrchSim? OrchSim is an orchestration simulator intended to achieve the highest degree of realism, but contrary to a lot of people who spend time making mock-ups and like sequencer, we wanted to just have it play from the score. So basically you have a notation software, which back then was Finale, which is now bankrupt. We add MIDI data filter and translator, sampler engine, which is where most of the work was done. Just audio routing and a sequencer for post-production and second layer of an interpretation. So I'm going to go very quickly through these things, but at first we needed to do some performance tests to see how many samples can you play at once and so on. And because of the technological development back then, there was a big leap when we passed from how they call them, CD hard drive to solid state hard drive. So that pretty much changed everything in the amount of software we could run, samples we could run at once. Just go back 1 second. I just want to say that in OrchSim, you can have 320 instrument slots. So these are basically virtual instruments. But then you end up with only 138 that can be routed at one time through a sequencer. And that's seems to be a software limit. So then there's the planification. Are you going to connect all of this? So we did a channel mapping for all the sampler instances. So we launched the same software 5 times because that's the maximum we can actually launch it. And then we map all these channels independently. Then we had to find a way to assign all the articulations to actual data to be interpreted and the transitions as well. So this is kind of like some screenshot of our Excel sheets where we plan our things. So we have numbers for each instruments. Then the different colors are the sample library they come from. And then on the right side of this, we have up to 100 articulation assigned. Well, 128, but we don't use quite all of them. And then there's the method, like how do you actually do this? So you need a score template, you need score symbols that trigger all these scripts and controllers. And you also need to reprogram the instruments because they're not perfect when you buy them. And you need to rebalance the instrument, now less than before, but that is back in 2010, 2012, 2013. It wasn't like today. There was a lot of issues with things like that. So this is how a score looked like when you had finished the rendering. So you have a lot of little gray things that if you see, do you guys see my mouse? Yes. So you have, for example, portato slow, cross X fade, timbral on, bow attack, noise normal, legato on, expressivo sound, normal attack on the sound, and sort of portamento, sorry. So yeah, a lot of hidden controls to generate this. So in 2015, 15, for a book by William Kaplan, we did our first test, and this is how it sounded like. So this is like our first attempt at thinking that maybe we could do something that's a little bit realistic. And I think I'm not sharing my audio on, am I? Whoops, sorry. Um, ah, okay, this bar more. Did they change this, the audio?
We don't hear anything at the
Yeah,
moment.
I'm gonna share again, sorry. Share some. Did you share the right screen?
No, it's still presenter.
Okay. Jeez. Sorry, one second. Share sound, share screen too. Okay. It should be okay now. Yeah. So anyway, it was a first try. It's not super dynamic. It lacks brightness and sharpness. It lacks a lot of dynamism. But this is what we had. After this, we were approached by Stephen for the first time and Megan Goodchild, which was doing research on the emotional response on timbre. So we were asked to do reorchestrations of La Mer, London Symphony by Vaughan Williams, and Host Planet. So I did one of them, Denis Boulian did another, and John Rea did the third one. I'm not gonna play the excerpt because it's gonna take too much time. But after this, we tried to do validation experiment just to see how much improvement we've made between the first version, DOSIM, and this new version, which we called OrchSim. There was some noticeable improvement. If you see, you always have like DOSIM on the left and OrchSim on the right. And in green, it's the simulation, and in blue, it's the actual recording. And you can see we're getting a little bit closer. It's not like perfect, but for many parameter, we're getting generally closer to some degree of realism. So this experiment was done by Stephen McAdams, and it reveals a lot. And at the end, I'll tell you that I'm working on a new one, which we're gonna do. But after this, we did stream and segregation experiments. So this is the kind of like the first time we worked with the taxonomy of Stephen. And I was working for Amanda Fisher. She was writing articles on Stephen's taxonomy, and we did some pretty realistic, more realistic excerpts then. So if I play you I'll start with the OrchSim version of the Bruckner Symphony number 6. So this is OrchSim 2. And this is the actual reference recording. So you can see some lines have more legato at the end here, but in general, like the sort of shape, dynamic shaping, and the timbral shape is much better than our first version. I'm gonna go further here. So after that, we did some post-validation experiment, and we had a lot of discussion. Okay, thinking about how we bring it to a new level. So I realized we really need to work more on the actual pitch of each instrument. not have the simulation as tempered as before. We need to clean the masking effect they are, because when you have hundreds of samples playing at the same time, they can't all mash up in the middle register. And also, I realized, I think, that nearly basically noise you think you don't hear, or you hear them, and they actually affect how you perceive the simulation a lot. So you need noise everywhere. So I started to add chair noise, close noise when the musicians are about to play. We don't realize it, but when string players are about to play, you hear the noise of all their shirts when they move the bow. Things like this, it builds expectation for the phrase and so on. And you know, the realism of the hall and just to say also, it's really important just during all of this, also the experience at making a simulation is equally important. So then finishing with this, the last challenge was to make a simulation that would challenge reality with no time constraint and no constraint at all, except with everything that was available. And that took me basically a year. And I made a simulation of the Prelude of Tristan. Now I have an experiment ready to run. Actually, I just need to get down to it. And then after that, we'll use the result of that experiment to start fresh. And I'm going to make a new system. Might not be called OrchSim, but we're going to make a new system based on what we get from there. So the new system will have immersive system hall simulation for sure, because this has been tested and proven. And I hope I can get Baptiste involved, our programmer for OrchPlay, too. He's really interested into AI and to make us a sort of AI interpreter in the channel routing of our whole thing that would basically optimize every line as automatically as possible. So this is in Germany what they've done with the Tristan simulation. It's Simon Jacobson that did this experiment. It was really revealing to me. It's a surround OrchPlay. On a 16 speaker array. This was really revealing to me. It's night and day, so you can't go back. So finishing with this, then how do we get from OrchSim to OrchPlay? So basically we thought, okay, we need to build an interface to make this actually useful for teaching and learning. So this is OrchPlay. So OrchPlay, basically it's a music library software, a bit like iTunes, but reimagined for a student and a teacher. So you can do a lot of things with this. I'm going to show you after that the features, but first of all, just the team. It's me and Denis who founded it, and then Baptiste is our programmer. And we had a lot of help from Dominique Lafortune and Philippe Matnam-Seguin. Most everyone in there is our composer. We're 4 composers and 1 programmer. So here, instead of making too many slides about the feature, I just want to share with you that you can go to this link here, orchestraplayer.com and features. And now it opened in the wrong window. Sorry, once again. Yeah. Okay. And you guys, everyone see this? Okay, this is our website, and here you on this page you have a video that just explains the possibility of the multi-channel library, what you can do with multi-channel format, how the score follower works, how you can customize your library, what you can do, the pictures you can add, the metadata you can add for doing research, and how to add your own documents as a teacher to your file. So you can have your library, but you can also have your PDF, your score, your article, everything connected to your files. With the score follower, you can click anywhere in the score. It's going to start the playback right from there, even if it's a stereo or a multi-channel file. how you use the score markings. You can use score markings in there. This iPad thing with the pen, it's me, I did it. You need to use an external application for that. It's called a Duet Display. Allows you to use your Mac with the iPad pencil, and it works quite well for drawing annotations on OrgView and OrchPlay, both softwares. There's a concert stage. This is useful. I mean, we've made this for when we were thinking that maybe children one day would want to learn a bit. So it's like you can just click on the instrument you want to hear, and it isolate the instrument. You have a little mixing desk. So if you want to give an example on the flute in the context of the orchestra, but then you find the flute is not really striking, it's not out enough, and the student might, not get it, then you can just boost it by 3 dB there before you create your bookmark and save your settings for your class. And yes, that's what I was talking about. You can create bookmarks, save all the markings you've made, and so on. You can share your bookmarks now. We have a much better sharing system. And well, every institution that has been partnered with the Actor project, like McGill and UDM, they all have access to OrchPlay for free, of course. And now we have downloadable bookmark lists. So I will show you this. And we have more than this actually coming, but I will show you this. That's OrgView. Okay, so before I get to OrgView, I'm gonna launch OrchPlay here. I'm running short on time. Okay, but when you launch OrchPlay, you have video tutorial here that will teach you the basics on the software. If you want to get started really quickly, you have these files that are suggested that you can download or load if you already have them. If you go to the teaching and learning section, which is the topic of today, you have instruction on how to create your account for institutions to get started. You have a bookmark list for classes. So here are examples. So for example, orchestration technique, 19th century, we have 4,450 examples, and 2,335 of them are multi-channel. So you can actually play with the channel. So you click on this, and then you just download the documentation and the PDF, and in PDF format, and the bookmark list. I'm not going to do a software run through because it's going to take me too much time, but you have your library here, which has been redesigned a bit from the screenshot I've shown you. And you have filter for your online files, downloaded files, imported files, so you can really filter everything as you wish. And for any file, you click on it and you simply double click here. It loads the file. And in the little folder here, you have documents for teachers. So here you will find teachers document. And you have, for example, a piano version, which can be useful. Oops, open on the wrong screen again. And so on. For after that, well, at the same time as I've been developing this, I've been working with, sorry, where's my PowerPoint? Here. Been working with Stephen, of course, and we designed the OrgView platform. So OrgView, it's really focused on score annotations. And the idea is that you can use all the data from the annotated score and build a huge database from this and use this data for research. And I mean, there's a lot of stuff done with this. There's some students, they've actually tried to use that data to find in audio files the blends, where instrument doubling blends or don't blend. You can do a lot of things with the data here. But just to say that to actually create OrgView, we needed to make sure that everything would just integrate together. So we made this little plan here where you had OrgSim and the score that we prepared for that, how they would be read by OrgView. Then you have all the audio production here, how everything would get connected here in OrgView, and here the research groups. So this includes Fabien, of course, and Victor and Stephen, all the research done, how we would be able to eventually build the annotation tools for that. And finally, the search engine that Stephen has been developing, Orchard, which is a gigantic search engine for all the annotated scores. And all of this had to integrate together. It was not easy. And OrgView has an instrument list for each score that you can assign instrument to staffs. You can select a recording. You have a grid overlay to actually well specify where the bars are, if that's really important. You have tools, of course, the annotation tools, which are all based on the taxonomies by Stephen McAdams and Denis Boulian for the orchestration techniques. And you have this is really important in the bottom right corner. It's the annotation list. So this is where everything that has been done is accumulated, and we're redesigning this year. So it's going to be, you'll be able to filter it and search through it. It's going to be much more useful. And I know I'm running out of time, but I just want to say for the end, the welcoming page in OrgView the home page allows you to download directly the OrgView file. So it's extremely easy to get started. Here you have links to Orchard to find the analysis that have been done on these files. And here you have the, if they exist in OrchPlay, you have a direct link to, you click on this, it opens OrchPlay and downloads the file if you don't have it, and opens the file if you actually have it. So this is, everything is connected. This was there. This was like the objective of the of my contribution to the Actor project.